Kate Mula Falcha, welcome to Irish Granny Helen. We're continuing our Saturday book. We're on video number 4 of The Hunt for the Skinwalker. And before I start, because I'll probably forget to say this at the end, this should be going public on Easter Saturday, so happy Easter. Where's my glasses? Okay, so we are on Chapter 22, Other Hotspots. Sorry about the reflection. So the Skinwalker Ranch is, from the book, by far the #1 place for bizarre experiences. It is for sure the most intensively studied. There are a few places that are similar, even if the number of sightings is smaller. They're similar. So one example would be the eastern slopes of the Cascade Mountains in south central Washington state. Native Americans for generations have legends that go way back that tell these same similar stories. One area is a 2,800 square mile forest area that has scattered farms and also the Yakima Indian Reservation. It's one of the most consistent hotspots of UFOs in North America. And Hynek, J. Allen Hynek, if you remember him from Project Blue Book way back when, one of the earliest projects even admitting that they were studying this. He did a formal study there. This is through the Air Force. Theoretically, formally, the Project Blue Book project ended in 1969. A lot of debate about, was it replaced by something else? Did it really end? Did it go underground? That's for another book. So they did something in 1972 called I believe it's called Toppenish study. This was associates of Hynek, and they redid it. I didn't copy down all the details of the study. It's more like collecting data using as modern equipment like electromagnetic, radar, all that kind of stuff. They repeated the same thing, collecting data in 74, 75, and 95. And they documented dozens and dozens of UFOs, close encounters. In fact, according to the researchers, it's hard to find anyone on the Yakima Reservation who hasn't experienced something or seen something. They have fire towers in the forest. You know, they're kind of like reverse lighthouses. You know, they're these really tall towers, and somebody is assigned to stay up there, and they look for smoke of forest fires, signs of forest fires. And personnel up there saw weird things so often that they just didn't even bother to report them anymore. So they don't really have an accurate number. Police officers, ranchers, government employees, and everyday citizens have seen not only orange balls of light that seem capable of performing impossible aerial maneuvers, but also aircraft larger than jumbo jets that witnesses say could stop in midair, perform U-turns or zigzag patterns, and zoom away in the blink of an eye. But some of the strangest events, according to this book, happened on the ground. There was a ranch family who had experiences very similar to the Gormans. Their pseudonym is Smith. They had a rural kind of farming, ranchy setup in this area in 1966. So they were there a few years. Excuse me. And in 1969, one day their dogs started completely freaking out. And when the rancher checked to see what the dogs barking about, the dogs were barking at a boy who was walking on the road in front of the farm, but he made no sound. It was very weird. I believe it was the rancher's wife who saw him. So she's looking out past the fields at what the dogs are barking at. And there's this guy, this kid walking by. And she watched him go by, and he went behind a tree, like an isolated tree at the side of the road, not a big forest. He went behind this tree, and he never came out. So she went to check because she thought, oh my God, he's fallen down. What the heck happened? And she went over, and there was just nothing. He just completely vanished. She was so freaked out. She had the tree cut down. So the family began to hear people's voices, sometimes speaking English, sometimes speaking a language that they couldn't recognize. One night, they heard the sound of little girls playing inside their house. The wife and the rancher started looking. They had been out in the yard. They heard these voices inside the house. Like, they didn't have little girls playing. So they went inside, and the voices stopped as soon as they went inside. One night, the rancher heard a loud male voice outside the bedroom window, and the voice was talking. They could distinguish what the voice was saying, and it was as though a man were standing outside their window describing and locating every single person inside the house. So he looked out the window, and there was nobody there, and the dogs didn't react at all. They heard many weird noises over time. This sounds very much like poltergeist activity. Footsteps, bumps, bangs, hammering, electronic beats. Once they heard a sound like a post driver, for making a fence. Some hammering on metal, like it was hammering metal posts into the ground. They heard it for a whole year. And it began at dusk, and it went on till dawn every night for a year. Oh my God. Visitors to the house heard it. People who came after it got dark, they heard it. And if they checked outside trying to find it, it would stop, but it would start up again in 15 minutes. So everyone in the family experienced weird poltergeist activity, and visitors. Knives, this is scary. Knives propelled themselves out of frying pans. Appliances jumped off hooks, and doors opened and closed of their own volition. Heavy objects mysteriously repositioned themselves. Tools disappeared, then reappeared in the same spot minutes later. A family friend who volunteered to help dig a ditch said he was repeatedly approached in broad daylight by what appeared to be the shadow of a man. Shadowy legs would walk up to him where he was working and just stand there, and the friend was spooked and left the property. So he'd be working, and out of his peripheral vision, he'd see what looked like legs show. Someone came up, and he could just, from the ground, see the legs. And when he looked over, they were just sort of shadowy, amorphous things. And I left too. There was a range of UFO encounters, weird lights, and they seemed to be under intelligent control. Sometimes the entire property was flooded by an intense light with no apparent source. In 1972, one night, there was a brilliant light, brighter than the sun, over their cornfields. It dimmed. It moved, it got brighter, it dimmed, it moved. At one point, the father, the rancher, saw that it looked like a zeppelin, a craft like a zeppelin, but it was the color of lead, and it was approximately as long as 3 railroad boxcars. It had portholes in its side. It had no obvious source of propulsion, but it was just sort of meandering over the cornfield at about 35 miles an hour. He thought he'd get his rifle, of course. He thought he'd get his rifle and his camera, but then he got this telepathic message that said, the family is in its sights. It would be foolish to act. and he felt that there was something intelligent on the craft. One day, they saw signs of something landed on the ground because they found this whole area of grass crushed. Another time, they saw weird marks. They had several cars parked side by side, and something landed on the roofs of the cars, and they knew that because they had weird marks consistent with, legs of something. Don't know what else to call it. This ranch that we're talking about here, which is in Yakima, and the Skinwalker Ranch, they both have these things in common. Both remote ranches, both with a family of 4 people, both involved with UFO sightings, poltergeist activity, both very close or adjacent to a Native American reservation. Both reported seemingly intelligent guidance from these things. And they also noticed that the phenomena often kind of reacted to the family's emotional state. So another hot spot was in Colorado, a remote ranch in Colorado. This was investigated by APRO. I didn't bother to write down what the letters stood for, but it was a leading investigative group in the 60s and the 70s. And it included a guy called Leo Sprinkle. That name should probably be familiar if you've read too many UFO books. His name pops up all the time. They included an anthropologist and a seismologist in their group. They published a book written by Timothy Good in 1991 called Alien Contact. So they had these witnesses, a couple and their sons and a family friend. And the family friend was a retired security officer from the Air Force. And they pooled their money to buy a vacant ranch near an unnamed military base. They're trying to keep this on the down low about where it is. So for 4 years, these people saw bizarre and scary things. Noises, humming with no source, UFO sightings, and including fleeting landings in front of the house. So once a group of 9 landed in front of their house, they saw many others in the sky at the same time. Sounds of heavy footsteps inside and outside the house. In October of 75, a cow was mutilated. They found Bigfoot prints big feet prints that followed a group of teenagers back from the woods to the house after they discovered the cow. Then there was a second mutilation, and the father went to the cops, and the deputy told him, I get hundreds of reports in this area. There's not going to be an investigation because it's probably ETs. The cop told him that. In Colorado was the first place with modern day reported mutilations. It's not the first place ever because we've done books on that before, and it was ubiquitous and through time. So depending on where you want to make your parameters of study, this was the first within this modern period of investigation. But today, and by today they mean 2005, there have been thousands and thousands of reports. Ranchers, and this rancher particularly, and others suspected the military or unscrupulous real estate agents trying to force them off their ranch. In the margins, I wrote, they stayed. They had Bigfoot sightings, which continued, and they even chased the family into the house. They found footprints, and hair on a fence. This got tested by a Denver biologist, and they could identify it was a primate, but they couldn't identify any particular species. It didn't have DNA. Once the father shot and hit one, saw it get hit, but there was no blood, kind of like the Gormans, if you remember. It barely reacted. He chased it. He heard a whine and a beep, something mechanical. I think he lost track of this creature. He reported it to the cops, and they yelled at him for using a gun. On the ranch, there were more than 20 people who were witnesses on this ranch. They saw Bigfoot. Some family members would have a sensation of being paralyzed when these things happened. Not, oh, I'm scared, but like they could not physically move. The wife was knocked out cold, unconscious, while looking out a window at UFOs floating in front of the house. The father came home and found his wife, unconscious, and his children cowering in fear. He ran outside and started shouting threats, threats at this UFO or Bigfoot or whatever it was, that he was going to blow up the property. And he got this loud reply back to him: "Dr. Jim, we accept." They saw humanoids in tight unitards. They once woke to see a 7-foot guy in a spacesuit and a helmet at the foot of his bed, and it vanished right before his eyes. The cops told him, don't worry about it. They don't harm people. One night, they had guests over, and they were listening to the stereo. Remember them? And this happened when the power went off and a voice emanated from every speaker in the place, the stereo as well as the television. The voice told the group, "We have allowed you to remain. We have interfered with your lives very little. Do not cause us to take action which you will regret. Your friends will be instructed to remain silent about us." One of the guests, an electronics expert, dismantled the stereo, determined to find out how this could have happened. The radio receiver had been off when the voice was heard. Only the phonograph was being used. The electronics expert was baffled. He speculated that some sort of transmitter might have been used, but such a transmitter would have had to have been incredibly powerful and sophisticated. In 1977, the father and son felt compelled to go out and go to the top of a nearby hill. And what did they find but a 35-foot charred circle on the ground? While they were there, they saw a yellow light in the tree, and the light seemed to be coming from a metal box that they could see, and it was humming. The father approached it, and he said the hums got angry. It sounded angry as he approached it. He took his son back. Oh, I guess they drove out. Took his son back to the car. And when the father returned, the box was gone. They had a friend who was a cop who had the same experience. When he came back with a friend, the box was gone. And the tree it had been sitting under had completely disappeared. The next night, they saw a light in the tree. They went there, and they saw two small men with blonde hair, large eyes, in flight suits. 60 feet down the hill, they saw a lit up UFO and a Bigfoot. The ET actually looked at them and said, "How nice of you to come," in perfect English and pretty good manners too. They apologized to him, and he told them that the mutilations were attracting the wrong attention. So they ordered a Bigfoot to pick up a box with a blinking light. It touched the box, and the Bigfoot dropped dead. And they told him, "Don't ever touch these things. The contact with them is lethal." They assured him they wouldn't tamper with his memory, but they could. They promised to return again to talk, and he felt that there was government involvement. Doesn't say why. And he went home. The family often saw, well, this may be why. They often saw military helicopters around the times of finding mutilated animals. but they were too small. They weren't big enough to lift a heavy cow up and have room to cut them open and then let them back down again. These bulls weighed 27-ish, 100 pounds. He called the base to complain to the colonel about helicopters landing on his property, and the colonel asked him about mutilations, and the rancher said that he thought the UFOs did it, and the colonel told him the base was having problems with UFOs. This is an interesting conversation. The colonel told him the base is having problems with UFOs. Then he asked, had anybody reported Bigfoot sightings? The colonel told him that the base was under strict orders of how to deal with these reports that they were getting, that yes, they were getting reports. So was this conversation some kind of weird psychological manipulation? Because it seems odd, doesn't it, that a military colonel on a base would divulge anything. APRO, that investigative group, they found these witnesses credible. At least they weren't hoaxing, they weren't lying. Something happened. Later in 2003, in the same area, they was identified on the internet as being sparsely populated Elbert County. This is, in other words, people decided they wanted to know where this anonymous ranch and base were. And they narrowed it down to this Elbert County southeast of Denver, but there's no military base there. However, right next to it is El Paso County that has 3 bases on it, including Peterson Air Force Base. Now, this is not the one associated with Ohio, where, you know, the alien bodies are supposed to be. Right, I'm thinking Wright-Patterson, so it's really not associated. Peterson is the hub of the U.S. Air Force Space Command and the U.S. Army's Airspace and Missile Defense Program. They work with NORAD at Cheyenne Mountain Complex. The father said the base was aware of UFOs, mutilations, Bigfoot, etc. Did the base orchestrate it all? This is the question. Is this psychological manipulation? Is it induced hallucinations? Is it hypnosis using actors in costume? Are they able to attribute the artificial luminous projection system and some sort of weird plasma technology, attribute that to UFO sightings? Was it done to scare the family off to take the property for the military? The family did move, but the Pentagon, they can just seize land. They do it all the time. They did it with Area 51. They took 80,000 acres of public land to create a buffer around the base that was already there. It was then they set up armed security all around the perimeter. 2 years later, they asked Congress for permission to do it. And they'd already ejected families. This is sad. They ejected a family from a mining operation that the family had worked on and owned they'd owned it for more than 100 years. But their site, their mine, overlooked Area 51, so they kicked them out. Both ranches were empty for years before the Gormans and the other family moved in. They didn't need any kind of military drama. The military could just have blocked a sale to anybody new. And the other thing I would point out is these stories go back way before there was an American military. Chapter 23, Vandals. By 1997, there was no useful data. They installed cameras in the area where there was a lot of dramatic activity, including dead calves, orbs, that weird orange hole in the sky that the black object climbed out of. But for a whole year, they just got absolutely no data on their equipment. July 20th of 1998, Gorman saw 3 cameras were not recording. He found that they had been badly vandalized, their wires ripped out, but there were other cameras up and working, and the team came. He called the team. They discovered that cameras that had been duct taped to trees and, posts and stuff, the duct tape was removed and completely missing. They saw from the recordings of the cameras that did work that all of the other vandalized cameras lost power simultaneously at 8:30 p.m. And they looked at the recordings of the still working cameras and there was nothing. They took the tapes to enhance them digitally. They saw that the lights on the cameras went out at 8:30. No explanation, no evidence of how or who. There was nobody there. Only 50 yards from where the calf was dismembered is where this happened. And it is described in detail, and I don't want to do that, but just let's put it this way. It was brute force. And they said, they finessed interfering with the technical stuff, and then there's this brute treatment of the calf. 8 months later, in April of 99, Ellen was with Gorman and they were padlocking the gate, and they got into the truck and they saw a dust cloud about a quarter of a mile away coming from their corral. He kept 2 horses in this corral. When he got there, they were kicking and agitated, and there was a reddish brown blur in the corral with them. At first he thought, God, it's just somebody's dog, but it wasn't a dog. It was a big, short-legged, heavy-muscled animal like a hyena with a bushy tail. It was harassing the horses. It looked very much like the combined dog, fox, hyena, boar combination, about 200 pounds. And when Tom ran at it, it ran away. And in the middle of running, it disappeared into thin air. But it left behind a kind of a nasty smell. Both horses had been scratched on their legs. They were bloody. In 1999, several others saw the creature again. Tom also saw that huge wolf like they'd seen at the beginning, and tiny bright red birds and huge spiders that disappeared. They'd come, they'd never seen that kind of bird before. They didn't know what it was. There'd be a bunch of them for a couple of weeks and then they'd disappear. And huge spiders, we won't even talk about that. The cameras didn't catch anything. The Gormans were warned that they were too obvious. The Gormans had warned the researchers that they were being too obvious, too heavy-handed, and when they were, it decreased the activity. They said they were like bulls in a china shop, coming in with all the equipment and blustering about. In 1997, at the enclosure for their dogs that they had, there was increased activity whenever the scientists were there. Orbs, lights, the creature in the orange portal all disappeared when the scientists were there, and the activity increased when they were gone. Did the activity decrease because the family and the emotions were gone, their stress? Or, the family left, taking their emotions with them at the same time that the scientists came. So they're trying to decide, did either one of those things, if at all, have an effect? Should NIDS try to engage the emotions and engage with these things? There was a flurry of activity and engage. Was this an attempt that to engage with the scientists? This flurry of activity that happened, and were the scientists showing up heavy-handed with equipment and scaring it off, or did it give up and leave because when the scientists showed up, emotion went down? Were they trying to engage emotionally? Did that make sense? I thought it made sense. Where am I? Okay. So now we're on chapter 24, the media. So the unusual events at the ranch were kept quiet because of how these things got distorted by the media. However, the secrecy backfired and created this weird mythology around the ranch. I have to say, I knew nothing about Skinwalker Ranch, nothing at all. I know there was a show. I never even saw the trailers for it and never read the books. I don't know. I just didn't. I was under the impression that there was some sort of like black magic, occult mystery, weirdness going on. This is the same sort of stuff that people have seen in all different places, just more of it. Small bits of truth got blown up and blown out of proportion and woven into this tapestry that had little resemblance to reality or truth. In 96, Gorman went public in the Deseret News. It's Salt Lake City. We didn't tell them everything, but the story got picked up by the AP. Then the radio news was attracting UFO enthusiasts. Tom allowed 2 of them to come camp for a few nights. He didn't like the publicity, but he hoped it would make the activity stop. So he was approaching financial ruin because of the dead cattle. He hoped the press scrutiny would make whoever was responsible, military, intelligence, whatever, back off, or maybe they'd get an answer. It did bring NIDS, which brought attention in general. So it was this media interview that he did that attracted NIDS and started to bring more attention to the whole situation. But the investigators at first, they were regarded very suspiciously as outsiders by locals. They tried to use the media to stop rumors and to ask for cooperation. They also hoped for more stories for study. If they made it public, they'd get more stories from people, especially about the cow mutilations, so that they could get samples. They were hoping people would get in touch with them right away so they could study the actual carcass. NIDS gave select interviews to a few Utah papers to assure the papers that they were all legitimate scientists, that they had not been in contact with lizard ETs, that they were available to investigate any local animal mutilations for free, and that they would maintain confidentiality if the people asked them. They said, we know so little. They told the news, we can't make conclusions. After these interviews, NIDS did a news blackout to not scare away the activity. So they're constantly in this delicate dance between talking about it and not being too obvious. 6 years felt like, after this now, felt like there was a cone of silence over the whole place. There were dozens of events by the entity, and they manifested in weird ways, but like I said, cone of silence. They didn't tell anybody what they saw. Groups of UFO enthusiasts showed up and camped on the edges of the property, just legally, on the other side of the property. In 97, a national science magazine did a very inaccurate article that Area 51 was moving its base to Utah. And people jumped to the conclusion that it was because of NIDS, and it is just totally rumor. In 2002, George Knapp, the radio guy, had gained their confidence early on. They shared information with him. He kept it secret, and eventually they let him bring TV cameras. This is in 2002, and gave permission for him to write about the whole thing. NIDS hoped for new leads about similar activity elsewhere. They're just trying to draw people out. Weekly alternative paper called The Mercury in Las Vegas did a 2-part story called The Path of the Skinwalker. And this, of course, this article went crazy, and it spread far from Vegas, even internationally. It was reprinted in UFO magazines globally. It was translated into a lot of different languages. Tabloid television came to Utah. They weren't allowed on the ranch, but NIDS was besieged by the media. Internet discussion groups devolved into dark rumors. There were theories of government intelligence creating this. The NIDS was called shadowy, with ties to the CIA or smuggling or casinos. I'm not sure how that was involved. NIDS was accused of being in a cabal called the Aviary with bird code names. And the goal of the cabal supposedly was to control all the information about ETs on Earth. There was the rumor that they had ET technology, that they were given access to free energy by the ETs, that the ranch was a secret laboratory generating experiments, that NIDS was creating a new global religion of control. They were criticized for not revealing all their data publicly, and criticized for asking saucer enthusiasts and UFO nuts to stop trespassing. They made the mistake of saying that publicly, calling them UFO nuts, and that didn't go down well. In 2004, a rumor was started by a maverick physicist that it's either 2 or 20, I can't read my handwriting. A number of NIDS investigators, it's 2, had been murdered on the ranch, and it was covered up by unknown forces doing it. And there was an all-out war with the ETs going on. None of this was true. This was all just made up out of whole cloth. The publicity was a double-edged sword. They got tons of information now from people. People started contacting them, but then they were tortured by tons of information, by the curious, the eccentric, and the phenomena went into hibernation. We're on chapter 25, the Hypotheses. So they did 8 years of intensive study. Most closely, they studied the hotspot, and it's the place in the country, at least, that's been the most investigated. And there's just, what they found was a weird overlap of all different kinds of anomalies. Poltergeist and paranormal activity, UFO activity, cryptoids, men in black. And not a tidy combo. They could never really establish a reason, a cause, a pattern. Much mutual hostility and suspicion between groups that study these different things still exists. Mainstream science denies the legitimacy of all of it, right? There's a caste system in anomalies between the groups, and I'll tell you what that means here. In the future, an adventurous sociologist might consider writing a paper that examines the caste system in anomalies research. The nuts and bolts UFO research people regard the psychosocial UFO researchers with disdain. The UFO researchers in general regard the cryptozoologists with contempt. Cryptozoologists who embrace the possibility of a paranormal connection to Bigfoot sightings are generally viewed with derision because of the prevailing view that Sasquatch is an undiscovered primate species, not an interdimensional playmate of alien beings. Likewise, the paranormal researchers view the UFO researchers with disdain, while the ghost hunters keep their distance from everybody else. All of this hostility and contempt is a vain and so far unsuccessful attempt to earn a small measure of respect and acceptance, and maybe funding, from mainstream science, a lofty but unlikely goal. They're all jockeying for the first grant to be given. NIDS and the Gormans between 1994 and 2004 experienced transient, isolated, anomalous events. Some were not repeated. All were opaque to interpretation. Some were physical. They felt like the mutilations, those were physical. Moving the bulls from the corral to the trailer, scoop marks left in the soil, destruction of the cameras, physical injuries, and other things. Those were physical, that were documented, measured, and seen. Some were invisible, like the 1997 creature in the hole in the sky, black objects that we're seeing, black shadows. But they all were observed by more than one person on infrared. There was a sense of something running past or splashing water going past, but nothing visible, or they'd smell something. In 1996, there were weird camouflaged or transparent predators, something invisible herding the ranch animals, moving them. Orbs of all sizes and colors. They seemed to have a physical effect on electronics and lights. They were associated with the incineration of 3 dogs, caused overwhelming sense of dread and fear. They caused the death of cattle and cattle abortions, and always appeared near mutilations. The author witnessed the shooting of a large cat-like animal from a tree. The author saw a dog, approximately 400-pound dog, shot, which didn't react and didn't bleed. It was like a bullet. That was the bulletproof wolf, they call it. NIDS had no real data. The phenomena were short-lived and elusive and unconnected. So the question is, were these phenomena from the same source, or was the ranch Grand Central Station where phenomena of all sorts intersected? So we talk about the hypotheses that are out there. Is it a hoax? Is all of this a hoax? Did the Gormans make it up because they were in financial trouble? Well, these guys worked with them for 10 years. They said there was no hint of dishonesty from them ever. And they didn't create hundreds of years of incidents that happened before they ever showed up. There were many witnesses outside of the family, law enforcement, reporters, scientists. It was legitimately documented. NIDS witnessed much that was not manufactured by the Gormans. They never craved media attention. They were embarrassed. They kept their name out of the news. They only spoke to reporters one time, very reluctantly. They left the ranch with extreme reluctance. Years later, they still didn't give interviews. They never wanted their new neighbors to know anything about it. So, yes, there are always hoaxes, but this was not a hoax. Delusions. NIDS took this possibility seriously. They looked for a psychological explanation. They did backgrounds of all witnesses. They studied fugue states, something called paraphenia, which we'll talk about, folie à deux, hallucinations, psychopathology in general. So paraphenia is late onset psychosis of schizophrenia. It can affect one part of your life, but not all of your life. NIDS did not do psychological testing. They were not psychological scientists. They didn't measure stress hormones. They didn't do blood chemistry. So the data might be considered incomplete. But they did find that there was no obvious evidence of psychopathology or group think, especially because in many cases, one person saw an anomaly and the guy standing next to him didn't. The third potential is this nature. Is there something seismic, something electromagnetic, something in the environment causing hallucinations? They investigated a number of possibilities. Tectonic strain theory, which shows a relationship between tectonic and seismic stress and anomalous aural phenomena, AURAL phenomena. So, for example, earthquake lights, where there's electromagnetic impulses released from seismic stress when the plates move, it lets off this energy. They may interact with the brain at a very low frequency. They looked for ultra low frequency radiation that can cause temporal lobe hallucination. And for this theory, the speculation is there's just no evidence. NIDS tried to connect this seismic stress with events happening, like they took geological measurements. They got resources that provided them with seismic information, and they aligned them up with all the events, and there was no correlation. They had not ingested hallucinogens in the environment. They only drank bottled water. They were not there were no psychoactive plants in the area. They recorded wind direction and eliminated something airborne from elsewhere. They mapped the magnetic field, nothing. So another theory is, was it advanced terrestrial civilizations that at some point in history, in the past, were they able to capture very advanced technology and control the world with it and use these events to create a story of ETs to cover up their activities? That's getting a little too complicated. Like a covert program of advanced technology found in the past and kept for, hundreds and hundreds of years. For example, in 1995, the Gormans were gathering hay on a summer evening. Tom saw a light hovering, kind of watching him, is the feeling he got. He charged at it and it fled. He hid in the hay bale. It came back and it scanned the field, he said, looking for him. It flew off and he taunted it as it left. He felt that he made a fool of it and that it exposed that it had fallibility. It wasn't all that advanced. But then the question is, were they toying with him? Another theory is it's extraterrestrial from another planet. Why especially the area of the basin? They weren't able to collect enough data. However, people saw metallic discs that hovered and disappeared in a flash of light. Classic UFO, These were also seen by the scientists, but there was a minority of weird things. This is an interesting question. The orbs, were they actually ET probes? SETI, the place that did the sending the noise out into the universe to try to get an answer, they postulated that these orbs were advanced probes and evidence of exploration from space. Certainly their behavior hints at intelligent control and advanced technology. One study in the 90s predicted that the data from 50 years supported this theory. These are like scout ships. The scientists could predict, the guy that was doing the study, from his data, he could predict the timing of when they would appear. The NIDS set up equipment in the hopes of proving this, and nothing. There was no spectrographic proof. They spent a lot of money analyzing artifacts with only terrestrial results, hair, DNA, footprints, bits of metal, dirt from where they landed. Another potential theory is that it's ancient astronauts coming back to check on their colonies. Well, there's no physical data of that. Let me see here. How am I doing? Okay. Chapter 28, military. Is this some new military technology that has been going on since the 1940s? What would be the agenda to test it on unwary people? Rural people are less likely to report it or complain. They're off the beaten path. They're kind of private in general. It's a closed community with a lower standard of living and not a lot of money. High number of Native Americans. A very convenient target population, as illegal as that would be. NIDS got a remote viewers. This was interesting. Got remote viewers. They used the structured scientific protocols. And these people that they hired have been proven accurate and able to access information. So despite the public announcement of the closure of the Stargate program in 1995, it was very successful, and it was widely believed that it continued secretly with the Defense Intelligence Agency and the CIA. So the top remote viewer was able to draw a very accurate map of the area, including part of the ranch which the remote viewer called very disturbing. Now you have to understand this remote viewer was nowhere, probably not even in Utah, nowhere near it. They were remotely viewing and did not know what it was they were looking at. They're under controlled situation. They're just given coordinates, map coordinates. And from there, they're told to go for it. And so he was able to draw a perfect map of the ranch and pinpoint an area that he felt was very disturbing. A second remote viewer found the middle of the homestead had weird energy vortices. Another saw a robotic drone of interdimensional origin mutilating the calf with some connection to the military. And I'm just going to put in here, you know, there's rumor that the government and the military have made either one or the other or both, and they may not each know the other has done it, have made a pact. You give us tech, we'll allow you to experiment in a limited way. The fourth remote viewer saw a military connection. A group of remote viewers were given random coordinates and told, describe events you see there. On July 1996, and then describe current events, and then describe events 5 years into the future. These are their conclusions. The site was of military operations with the Navy and the Pentagon. They saw naval ships, armed men in uniform, dark sunglasses, Navy tattoos, large honeycomb grid of sophisticated electronic equipment and wires embedded in the ground. Activity at night, sparkling lights in the sky, a humanoid with a long neck and a large head speaking a foreign language. The remote viewers all felt a strong sense of dread, anxiety and nerves, and darkness and death. So the question is, was there an underground military facility in this spot? The Gormans often heard the sounds of heavy metal machinery, metal equipment coming from the earth. They were warned. Remember when they sold, when the property was sold to them, the previous owners got it in a contract that they weren't to avoid digging unless they first contacted the previous owners. One psychic came to look at a mysterious ice circle in their pond and said, well, that's the result of underground technology. All of this is not solid evidence. It's just exploring possibilities, but nothing can be ruled out. Military intelligence is able and willing to do this sort of thing, even when it is illegal. Military personnel have been seen in the vicinity. Helicopters, have been seen in the vicinity. Is all of this holographic projection, is it advanced camouflage for new stealth technology? Is it intentional terrorizing? Is it psychic experiments? It's all illegal. And it's all despicable. Much of the phenomena seem beyond military capability, like the blue orbs of swirling light and the vaporized dogs. So is this all mind control? Is it all hallucinogenic? Some creatures did leave footprints and created wounds on horses and dismembered calves and left physical impressions in the grass and in the soil. There are rumors of military fake UFOs and fake ET visits. Are they rumors to cover secret military high-tech projects? In 2005, Richard Doty, a retired special agent for the Air Force OSI, Office of Secret Intelligence, I'm guessing, admitted that he participated in this sort of thing, including a campaign to convince a particular physicist, Paul Benowitz, that an alien base existed in Dulce, New Mexico. Dulce and the Utah Basin have so many similarities. Is the basin another Air Force OSI disinformation campaign? A lot of unanswered questions. What would be the motivation? Was it to force the Gormans to move? Was it to lead NIDS astray or discredit them? Nothing can be refuted and nothing can be proven 100%. What could cause huge what could cause a huge bulletproof wolf, one that left behind a chunk of shot off flesh that then decomposed? How did they sneak into Ellen's bathroom, remove her towel and hairbrush, unpack her groceries from the kitchen cabinets, or hide a spatula from the frying pan in the freezer, or switch the salt and pepper in the salt and pepper shakers? This is all stuff that happened in their house. What about the Native American stories of 15 generations back? The military didn't do that because the military didn't exist, to our knowledge. So that's the end of that chapter, and we're going to stop here because it's been almost an hour, and I don't like to wear everybody out. Too much of a good thing, you know. So that's the end of video number 4, and I will be back again. And hope this is still grabbing your attention. It is freakish, absolutely spookadelic. Thanks very much for watching, and oh yes, happy Easter, Slungafoil, Sluncha.